let's talk about a dark topic that you're one of the world experts in, kidnapping. So you teach courses on counter kidnapping and terrorism. I read an estimate that criminal gangs get $500 million a year in ransom payments from kidnapping. So just at a high level, what is kidnapping? Who does it and why? What are some insights that can help us understand what is this problem in the world?
It happens in different ways in different parts of the world. I mean, I just sent off a group of people that trained some of the Ukrainians, and some of the stuff that they were showing them was some of the counter custody stuff that I showed them. A friend of mine named Vince went out there and was showing them some of the aspects of how to utilize things like Kevlar cordage and how to infuse it in their uniform. So if they get zip tied, to cut them open. It's a war setting, so it talks about being captive in a war zone. But the information or the methodology actually comes from Mexico. That methodology, as far as how I learned it.
In terms of how to escape from restraints and stuff like that.
So in Mexico, you have abductions happening where cartels who hold control over a specific place or zone are having a hard time with financial situations, as far as maybe they're not making enough money to pay everybody off. So they let them freelance, basically. And a lot of ways, some of these criminal groups freelance, or some of these groups actually professionalize in to abduct businessmen, abduct the sons of businessmen or people that have money, to ask for ransoms for them, basically. And they've taken, captivity and abduction to like an art form in places like Mexico. And it has a history all over the world, but specifically my experience with it was going to cartel safe houses that turn into holding places. You would see, homemade prison cells and stuff like that, and people being held in captivity for months, if not years, as they were milking their family for everything they owned.
So it turns out into a business. They're not actually even interested in hurting the people physically. They're interested in hurting them financially.
And also this, if they get hurt, they're hurt for a purpose, which is to make their family pay out faster or more. Some of the abduction groups that I've seen out there, professional ones in Mexico, basically make it a living to target people that have abduction insurance or that work for companies that have good abduction insurance. So it's almost like an ATM for them. It's like, here again. So there's some of that going on. Some not so much. Some abductions are express. I mean, I'll grab you with in gunpoint, take you to an ATM, you empty it out, and then you're on your way. That's an express kidnapping. That might not be worth you doing anything insane. You just go with the motions. But some people do get picked up. I have trained people with prior experiences of abductions in Mexico and here in the United States, people that have spent some time in captivity with loved ones here, like ex-boyfriends or boyfriends that tie them up and beat the shit out of them. And the restraints they utilize are zip ties and handcuffs sometimes, or duct tape, or their own clothing, things of this nature. Basically, what somebody's looking for when they tie anybody up is to convince you that they are in control, that they are God, and that any hope of you releasing those restraints or getting out of that situation is hopeless. From a cartel group picking you up in the middle of a dirt road somewhere in Cancun, to ex-boyfriend showing up at your house and tying you up till you agree to get back with him. That's the same thing. And some of the restraints that are being utilized come from different places. I mean, I remember an instructor I had way back when told me that the proliferation of zip ties as a restraint in criminal abductions came up after the movie Heat came out, because everybody wanted to be Robert De Niro zip tying people in the bank robbery at the end of the movie. Yeah. Criminals saw that, and it became like a
hilarious
thing.
Can you actually speak to is it possible to systematically learn how to escape restraints like handcuffs, rope, zip ties?
The best at it are not the military. They're not SEER program people. They are criminals. I learned how to get out of handcuffs from a 15-year-old who was in charge of meth sales in La Avenida Revolucion in Tijuana.
Is there a system to it?
I mean, it's not specifically a system. It's usually what happens is they'll buy a set of handcuffs and they will mess around with them in a playing feature. So one thing I do in a class is, first off, I'm honest about the fact that all restraints are temporary, even marriage.
This is like, wait, can we just pause on the deep philosophical? You're like Miyamoto Musashi with that statement. All
restraints are temporary. even marriage. I just like adding that one in there for last because this is a dark subject.
Every cage can be escaped.
All restraints are temporary. You either free yourselves from the restraints, somebody else takes them off, or you die and your body rots your way around them. Those are the options. And I like that first option myself. The second option is pretty cool if you can convince somebody to do that for you. But that first option is an interesting one. You have to deconstruct restraints. Not all restraints are made the same. You can train to get out of handcuffs here in the U.S. and focus on a pair of Smith & Wesson handcuffs, which are kind of the most common brand of handcuffs here. But if you find yourself in detention somewhere in Russia, the handcuffs out there are completely different. The keyway is different. The mechanism is different. But some of the same ways of bypassing those mechanisms
Let me
are...
write this down. So in Russia, what kind are they using in Russia? Thinking of traveling there. I need this information.
I'll send you a specific model and details on how to get out of those. But basically,
just asking for a friend. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So what I do is I take a pair of Smith & Wesson handcuffs. I put them in the middle of 3 people in a class. I spread them out, and I have them place them on each other in a just playing manner. I have handcuff keys there, and I have a pair of bolt cutters there in case somebody gets stuck, does something stupid. So they play with each other as far as putting them on randomly. I show them how to put them on appropriately, and then I show them a handcuff key, and a handcuff key will open up handcuffs, interestingly enough. But the thing about a handcuff key is it's not made to be used by the person that is in those handcuffs. So that's the first lesson there. If you have a handcuff keys are the most used tool to open up handcuffs in custody situations. Both criminals escaping from the police to people escaping from criminals. Just a standard hidden handcuff key. So I show them how to modify the handcuff key so it's more optimal to use on yourself with just basic garbage that you can find. Piece of wire, a zip tie piece, basically how to put a leverage arm on the handcuff key so you can actually spin it in the keyway behind your back or in front of you.
I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever been in handcuffs.
Appropriate way to handcuff somebody is palms out.
How much restriction is there in terms of...
There's a lot. If it's a hinge handcuff, there's a lot of restriction with no chain in the middle.
Can you reach back?
You could try and reach back, or you can basically put yourself in a not compromised position and feed the most of your palm meat into the handcuff way. So when they shut it on you, you have more space to work with. So you can spin your hand. We call it a passive resistance. Again, you go through a process with them where you deconstruct how people are handcuffed, handcuff keys, and how to modify handcuff key to be able to use on yourself. And all of these things they're constructing as we go. So they basically, hey, what's a grinding surface? Well, there's concrete outside. So they grind an angle on the key so you can get a key not to go straight into the keyway, but you can get it into the keyway at an angle, for example. It's something that is out there as far as a method. You can't spin a key behind your back because it's small. It's designed to be used by somebody else opening those handcuffs on you. So you put an arm on it so you can leverage our arm so you can spin it behind your back. You learn how to put yourself in not a compromised position. If somebody asks you for your hands so they could be cuffed, you don't do this. You do that, or you put yourself in a gable grip behind your back, which is a pretty strong grip, and it's hard to spread those hands apart. It's also something that people go into automatically when they're in fear. So all of these things are advantageous for you. And you learn how not only people get restrained, but you see videos of them because I show a bunch of abduction that's actually happening live. Again, the best thing is avoidance, but specifically when you work around restraints is, number one, learn how some of these restraints work. Number two is learning how some of the ready-made tools to get out of the restraints look like, function. And number three, which is the advanced level, is learn how to construct all of these things yourself, which is, I think that is the best thing you can show somebody. For handcuffs, I just use a standard pair of handcuffs, and then we deconstruct other very specialized handcuffs that might be out there. And you show them, if you're going to travel somewhere, learn what restraints are commonly available in the environment. Somebody going to sub-Saharan Africa, carrying a plastic handcuff key, that's going to be useless out there because there's not going to be standard handcuffs out there that would be open with that type of key. Out there, you're probably going to be tied up with a chain and a padlock of some sort, maybe a 40 millimeter Chinese padlock with a plastic core that you can open with a lighter if you can burn the core, melt the core open, or If you can leverage that open, that's a pretty easy thing to open. Or a bobby pin, you could reach all the way in the back and open the latch.
What about rope? Is that common?
Yeah, it is common. This is one of my favorite things for rope. Something I usually carry in some places. It's another gift for you if you want. It's a ceramic razor blade.
Nice.
Is it capable of cutting?
Nice.
Small. You can put it behind a label. I've seen some students put the Levi's label on there and just sew it back on. Mm-hmm. It is non-magnetic, non-ferrous, so in and out of that type of situation you can get in it, and it's something you can have with you everywhere. This is a pretty fancy one, or you can just grab a simple razor blade. Actually learning how to use or leverage a razor blade between your palms and know how to go up and down with it. Nice. To be able to cut yourself out of rope. And of course,
so that's just practice to do that well.
It's practice, and it's also exposure to just, this is a possibility. This is how you could hide it. Again, the whole smuggling aspect comes from a criminal mindset type setting. So how things are hidden, where they're hidden. And when I talk about concealing objects of this nature, it usually comes from smuggling. The fact that I have something in a notebook comes from heroin smuggling. If you're not looking at the school of criminality, you're missing out on a big part of the equation.
So for people who want to learn about this, do you teach courses on this? Do you know how do you get in touch with you or learn from you? Do you have stuff online, or is it only in person?
So I have some stuff on my Patreon, specifically. I have a Patreon where I share a lot of the online material. Basically this is my notebook. I have a bunch of stuff that I just met somebody in Philadelphia that showed me a pretty unique way of utilizing a box cutter as a weapon. So I wrote some of that down. I filmed some of it. And it's not for any other reason. I'm not trying to create dangerous people out there. It's like, hey, look at this. This is something that's out there, right? So a lot of that information, some of those notes and stuff like that, I keep on my Patreon. I used to share it openly on Facebook and Instagram, but that that has not been possible anymore.
Well, I'm a member of your Patreon and I recommend people sign up. It's really great because you also have philosophy. You're the you're the Mexican Miyamoto Musashi. So it's not just these skills; it's also the philosophy around it.
Like I got that book of 5 rings before I went into training. Like I took that with me through training. The whole aspect of go to places frightening to the common brand of men. Be put in jail and extricate yourself with your own wisdom. I think he was speaking about experience. The whole warrior's journey, the hero's journey of going out there and actually risking. I think that's a pretty big basis and aspect of what the work I do and showing some of these things. There's a tendency to people to say, hey, I'm afraid to go to Mexico. What do I need to know? It's like, well, if you're afraid to go to Mexico, go to Mexico. I was in Detroit. I was pretty afraid when I was in Detroit and some parts of Detroit and the South Side Chicago. But I don't want to be dictated where I can go and where I can't go because of safety. I want to take responsibility for that myself and figure out ways of being more capable and an asset to the people around me and myself. And that comes through experience. And people don't want to risk getting a shoulder injury rolling in jiu-jitsu, or don't want to risk getting a bloody nose in boxing, but that is the way.